How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. While the Lakers have made a few very noteworthy new additions to their team this year with players like Dennis Schroder, Montrezl Harrell, and most recently with Andre Drummond, will they be able to retain any of them long term? None of them are signed through next year, and in fact, the Lakers have very few players in general signed beyond this year. In this video, we'll talk about the potential problem the Lakers will have to run into later this year during free agency and how it could be an issue for them in bringing back a majority of the players on their current team. Like I mentioned before, they have very few players who are on guaranteed contracts through next year, and while that can be a good thing in terms of being able to restructure a team if needed, it can be very difficult to do for a team like the Lakers that will have very little financial flexibility. Even though they don't have many players who are under guaranteed contracts through 2022, the players they do have under guaranteed contracts like LeBron, AD, Kuzma, Caldwell-Pope, and Gasol already take up nearly the entire projected salary cap for 2021-2022, meaning that unless they were to make a trade to move one of those contracts, the only players that they would really have the ability to sign for anything more than a veteran minimum contract or using the taxpayer mid-level exception are their own players who they currently own the bird rights to. They can go over the salary cap to retain one of their own players, but there is a limit to what they can pay each of them. If they own a player's bird rights like they do with CARUSO, then they won't have as big of a limit on what they can pay them, but for a player like Andre Drummond, for example, who they don't own the bird rights to, the most they could offer him without having more salary cap room would be the taxpayer mid-level exception, which is only worth a little over $6 million. Here's where their big problem lies, as it will definitely handicap their ability to make any big moves during free agency, especially now knowing that they will be unlikely to reach an agreement with Schroder on a contract extension before he becomes an unrestricted free agent. Having to go into free agency not knowing if he'll be a part of their team moving forward can prevent them from making other moves early on in free agency. That in turn could potentially cause them to lose members of their current team like Caruso or Harrell if they were to get an early offer from a different team that they didn't want to pass up on. But on the other side, Schroder would likely be the only big move in free agency that they would be capable of making. It will heavily depend on how much money he'll demand, and as of right now, it's looking like he wants around $25 million per year, but he would be the only player that they would be financially capable of paying that much money to. Let's say that he does really well in the playoffs for them and they decide that they need to keep him around long term and they pay him that kind of money. How would that affect their ability to round out their team after that? If they were to sign him right away during free agency, they would still be able to bring back players with the raise that they've had on their team for over a year, like Caruso, THT, and even Markieff Morris. Although, that would very likely be saying goodbye to players like Montrezl Harrell and Andre Drummond, both of which they wouldn't be able to give much of a pay increase to keep around. Harrell does have a player option for next year at a little under $10 million a year, but I really doubt that he would opt into that, given that more teams will have money in this upcoming free agency. Overall, in regard to keeping Schroder around long term, it will be a tough choice to make for them. How he plays come playoff time will definitely make that decision easier to make based on how important he proves to be when it really matters, but as of right now, it is looking like they'll be hesitant to pay him the kind of money that he does want. But now moving on to looking at the problem with a few other of their upcoming free agents, and the next one we'll go over is Andre Drummond, and if it would even be possible to keep him around. I briefly mentioned before how it would be very unlikely that they'd be able to keep him without letting Schroder go, along with also probably having to trade Caldwell-Pope too. To get far enough under the salary cap to give him the kind of contract that he'd likely even be interested in, which would probably be somewhere along the line of $15 million per year, there would be no way to keep Schroder, and they would also have to free up additional room by again trading either Caldwell-Pope, Kuzma, or both. If it becomes more clear to them that they won't be able to retain Schroder, then maybe keeping Drummond around long term would become a little more likely, but it would still require them to make some moves for it to work. For them to even want to consider doing that, Drummond will have to prove that he is a good fit beside LeBron and AD, and especially with AD. If he could prove to be a near perfect complement to him down low, and be a plus for their team come playoff time, then maybe it becomes a little bit more realistic. Drummond will need to prove that he can make life easier on Anthony Davis and can contribute to their team winning long term with that pairing. His timeline as a player does match up well with AD, considering they are both the same age, so that would be a benefit. However, at the end of the day, for it to even work, Drummond will need to realize that as a traditional big man in today's NBA, he wouldn't be able to make anything more than around the $15-ish million that they would likely be able to offer him if they were to let Schroder walk and trade a guy like Caldwell-Pope. Again, them even wanting to do that will heavily depend on how he performs with the team, but it would overall be a challenge to keep him around long term. But now let's move on to looking at their next problem, which will be retaining TALEN Horton-Tucker. There has been a lot of talk about whether or not a different team might try to pry him away during free agency, which would become a big problem for them. They will be able to match any contract offered to him, but where it would become a big problem is if a team would offer him a huge contract. There is a limit on what they could offer him because of the Gilbert Arenas provision, which I'll put on the screen here for you to read, but basically, a team could offer him a 4-year contract that is worth the mid-level exception in year 1 and year 2, but then could become worth what a max level contract would be worth in year 3 and 4. Would a team be crazy enough to offer him that? I really doubt it, but it would depend on how well he plays for them come playoff time. If a team would offer him that kind of money, I really doubt they would match it. That would mean losing their only young talent for nothing, which is the ultimate fear for them regarding TALEN Horton-Tucker. However, I really don't see it happening, as although he does have a lot of potential, I really don't believe any team would give him that kind of money based on how well he's played this year. Finally though, their last big free agency problem could come with CARUSO. He is an ultimate fan favorite and a player they will not want to lose. He will definitely generate interest in free agency, but the tough thing will be to predict how much money he will actually be offered. Because the Lakers do own his bird rights, they could theoretically offer more than any other team, but the problem would be how much money are they willing to pay a role player. I can't imagine he would get offered anything more than around $8 million per year by a different team, but if some team were crazy enough to offer him $10 million plus per year, that would likely mean losing him. I doubt that will happen, and even if it did, I would not be surprised if he were to be willing to take a discount like Kyle Kuzma did to remain in LA, considering how much money he makes outside of his NBA contract from being a popular figure in LA. Of all of their current free agents, I think CARUSO would be the most likely to return. In conclusion, even though we are far ways away from free agency yet, the Lakers do need to keep all of this on their mind. Even though focusing on the present is what is most important, especially for a team like the Lakers in championship contention, they always do need to keep their mind on the future too. And I want to do that by providing an early outlook on what they might be dealing with come free agency in 2021. But what do you guys think? What do you think will be their biggest problem that they will have to deal with during free agency? Will it be trying to retain Schroder? Maybe trying to keep Drummond around long term? Or will it be a problem with a team trying to pry away one of their younger players like TALEN Horton-Tucker or CARUSO? Let me know by commenting down below and we can talk about it there. That will do it for this video though. Thank you to everyone who took the time to watch until the end of the video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please remember to drop a like on the video and to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and turn on notifications to get notified right away when I drop a video. But as always, thank you for watching and have a great day.